Hello, Year 2, and welcome to Thursday's Reading Skills. Now, as I told you yesterday, today is one of our fluency days. So just to remind you, I did mention on Tuesday, I've introduced fluency days just as a day for us to still continue with our reading skills, but it just breaks it up ever so slightly, and it's just an opportunity for us to practice our reading, okay, without necessarily then having to answer those questions afterwards. So when we're working on our fluency today, I'd expect you to be working on things like your sight reading, speed of your reading, so trying to build up a really good pace. Also seeing if you could potentially add some expression into your reading today as well, okay? So each time I'm turning the page, it'd be really nice if you could pause the screen and have a go at reading that text yourself, okay? And then maybe have a go at reading it through with me when I then read it, okay? So we are going from chapter 12 today, and we're going to read 12 and 13. If you have a copy of the book at home, you will be reading from page 45, okay? So off we go then. Mr. Fox and the three remaining small foxes dug fast and straight. They were all too excited now to feel tired or hungry. They knew they were going to have a whacking great feast before long, and the fact that it was none other than Boggers's chickens they were going to eat made them chug with laughter every time they thought of it. It was lovely to realise that while the fat farmer was sitting up on the hill waiting for them to starve, he was also giving them their dinner without even knowing it. "Keep digging," said Mr. Fox. "It's not too much further." All of a sudden, a deep voice above their heads said, "Who goes there?" Foxes jumped. They looked up quickly, and they saw, peeking through a small hole on the roof of the tunnel, a long black pointed furry face. "Badger!" cried Mr. Fox. "Foxy!" cried Badger. "My goodness me, I'm glad I've found someone at last. I've been digging around in circles for 3 days and nights, and I haven't the foggiest idea where I am." Badger made the hole in the ceiling bigger and dropped down beside the foxes. The small badger, his son, dropped down after him. "Haven't you heard what's happening up on the hill?" Badger said excitedly. "It's chaos. Half the wood has disappeared, and there are men with guns all over the countryside. None of us can get out, even at night. We're all starving to death." "Who is we?" asked Mr. Fox. "All us diggers. Me, Mole, Rabbit, and all of our wives and children. Even Weasel, who can usually sneak out of the tightest spots, is right now hiding down my hole with Mrs. Weasel and 6 kids. What on earth are we going to do, Foxy? I think we're finished." Mr. Fox looked at his 3 children and he smiled. The children smiled back at him, sharing his secret. "My dear old Badger," he said, "this mess you're in is all my fault." "I know it's your fault," said Badger furiously, "and the farmers are not going to give up until they've got you. Unfortunately, that means us as well. It means everyone on the hill." Badger sat down and put a paw around his small son. "We're done for," he said softly. "My poor wife up there is so weak she can't dig another yard." "Nor can mine," said Mr. Fox, "and yet at this very minute she is preparing for me and my children the most delicious feast of plump, juicy chicken." "Stop!" cried Badger. "Don't tease me. I can't stand it." "It's true," cried the small foxes. "That's not teasing. We've got chickens galore." "Because everything is entirely my fault," said Mr. Fox, "I invite you to share the feast. I invite everyone to share it. You and the mole and the rabbit and the weasel and all of your wives and children. There will be plenty to go around, I can assure you." "You mean it?" cried Badger. "You really mean it?" Mr. Fox pushed his face close to Badger's and whispered darkly, "Do you know where we've just been?" "Where?" "Right inside Boggers's chicken house number 1. "No." "Yes, but that is nothing to where we are going now. You have to come just at the right moment, my dear Badger. You can help us dig, and in the meanwhile, your small son can run back to Mrs. Badger and tell all of the others to spread the good news." Mr. Fox turned to the small badger and said, "Tell them they are invited to Fox's feast." Then bring them all down here and follow this tunnel back until you find my home. Yes, Mr. Fox, said the small badger. Yes, sir, right away, sir. Oh, thank you, sir. And he scrambled quickly back through the roof of the tunnel and disappeared. 13. Bunce's giant storehouse. My dear Foxy, cried Badger, what in the world has happened to your tail? Don't talk about it, please, said Mr. Fox. It's a painful subject. They were digging the new tunnel. They dug on in silence. Badger was a great digger, and the tunnel went forward at a terrific pace now that he was lending a oar. Soon they were crouching underneath yet another wooden floor. Mr. Fox grinned slyly, showing sharp white teeth. If I am not mistaken, my dear Badger, he said, we are now underneath the farm which belongs to that nasty little pot-bellied dwarf, Bunce. We are, in fact, directly underneath the most interesting part of the farm. Ducks and geese, cried the small foxes, licking their lips. Juicy, tender ducks and big fat geese. Exactly, said Mr. Fox. But how in the world can you know where we are? Asked Badger. Mr. Fox grinned again, showing even more white teeth. Look, he said, I know my way around these farms blindfold. For me, it's just as easy below the ground as it is above. He reached high and pushed up one of the wooden floorboards, then another. He poked out his head through the gap. Yes, he shouted, jumping up into the room above. I've done it. I've hit it smack on the nose, right in the bullseye. Come and look. Quickly, Badger and the three small foxes scrambled up after him. They stopped and stared. They stood and gaped. They were so overwhelmed that they couldn't speak, for what they now saw was a kind of fox's dream, a badger's dream, a paradise for hungry animals. This, my dear old Badger, proclaimed Mr. Fox, is Bunce's mighty storehouse, and his finest stuff is stored in here before he sends it off to market. Against all the four walls of the great room, stacked in cupboards and piled upon shelves reaching from floor to ceiling, were thousands and thousands of the finest and fattest ducks and geese, plucked and ready for roasting. And up above, dangling from the rafters, there must have been at least 100 smoked hams and 50 sides of bacon. Just feast your eyes on that, cried Mr. Fox, dancing up and down. What do you think of it, eh? Pretty good grub. Mr. Fox climbed up the ladder and handed down 3 magnificent hams. And you like bacon, Badger? I'm mad about bacon, cried Badger, dancing with excitement. Let's have a side of bacon. That big one up there. And carrots, Dad, said the smallest of the 3 foxes. We must take some carrots. Don't be a twerp, said Mr. Fox. You know we never eat things like that. It's not for us, Dad. It's for the rabbits. They only eat vegetables. Oh, my goodness me, you're right, cried Mr. Fox. What a thoughtful little fellow you are. Take bunches of carrots. Soon all this lovely loot was lying in a neat heap upon the floor. The small foxes crouched close, their noses twitching, their eyes shining like stars. And now, said Mr. Fox, we shall have to borrow from our friend Bunce 2 of those useful push carts over in the corner. He and Badger fetched the push carts, and the ducks and the geese and the hams and the bacon were loaded onto them. Quickly, the push carts were lowered through the hole in the floor. The animals slid down after them. Back in the tunnel, Mr. Fox again pulled the floorboards very carefully into place so that no one could see that they had been moved. My darlings, he said, pointing to 2 of the 3 small foxes. Take a cart each and run back as fast as you can to your mother. Give her my love and tell her we are having guests for dinner. The badgers, the moles, the rabbits, and the weasels. Tell her it must be a truly great feast. And tell the rest and tell her the rest of us will be home as soon as we've done one more little job. Yes, Dad, right away, Dad, they answered, and they grabbed the trolley each and went rushing down the tunnel. Okay, then year 2. So that is the end of chapter 13. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that you were reading along and practicing your fluency. As I said earlier then, nothing to send in today, but we will have some questions tomorrow. So I will see you then for reading skills. See you later, everyone. Bye.